Welcome, everyone, to the Ramana Maharshi International Study Circle Satsang, headquartered here in San Diego, California. Glad to have you joining us today. We are welcoming right now, especially, which we love to do every first Sunday of each month, Michael James joining us live from London to answer all your questions and any of your questions about Ramana Maharshi's wonderful teachings that keep us on this path, in this sense of understanding who we are. Welcome, Michael. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good to have you with us again today.
Right.
If you are watching this on YouTube, and more people seem to be doing that, and I'm glad you decided to use that, Michael, because it's important to spread the word. I think I'm not a an evangelist or anything, but I do think this is the most important message people ever get. And you spend it so well using YouTube. If you're watching us there, you are welcome to join us live every month by simply sending me your email address. My name is Ted. Send it to newsguy55@aol.com, newsguy55@aol.com. And you're welcome also to join us every week after that, if you want, for our 90-minute satsang here in San Diego. Now, let's get started with our very first question. And it's a long one. It's a good one. It's the one that came in last. And I'm looking right down at the middle of my screen, and McNair's here, so I'll read it. He says, sometimes I feel as if self-inquiry is helping me in many ways. Don't we all? Specifically when thoughts and feelings of sadness and grief arise. I'm able to do self-inquiry, which ends up lessening the particular feelings and thoughts at that time. However, when it comes to applying self-inquiry to my desires, I have less success. Desires that arise can be a whole range of areas. Desires for a certain job, for example, for a vacation, for a certain response from my spouse. I think we've all been there. Desire for a different place to live, etc. And then there is the resulting frustration when the desire is not fulfilled, or the quiet guilt or discouragement when the desire is fulfilled, and I realize, after all, that the desire was not in line with my better aspirations. If self-inquiry does help, Michael, it seems to do so only momentarily. There is never full freedom from the desire. The desire can seem to disappear for a while, but eventually it raises its head again, or heads again, like the many-headed hydra that Hercules battled. Now, last paragraph. My question is there a way to apply the process of self-inquiry that would result in a more permanent cessation of a desire? Or is there any exercise or technique you can suggest, in addition to self-inquiry, that can help in addressing a desire as it arises? And does the idea of surrender enter into this in any way? If so, how? Michael, a very long question, but I think it's one practically all of us can relate to.
Yes. This is a problem that we are all up against. Anyone who is following this path will definitely be up against this problem. For whom are all desires? Desires of the ego. When in sleep, for example, there is no ego, or we do not rise as ego, and therefore we are free of all desires. When as soon as we rise as ego, either in waking or in dream, along with ego, a whole baggage arises. That is, the desires we have in their seed form are what are called vasanas. Vasanas are the inclinations that give rise to likes and dislikes, but in turn give rise to desires and so on. So it is the very nature of ego to have vasanas and consequently to have desires. So we cannot be free of desire until we are free of ego. So self-inquiry is not merely attempt temporary solution to temporary. I mean, desires are constantly changing because, as Bhagavan says, vasanas rise in countless numbers like ocean waves. Vasanas are constantly arising in our mind and pulling our mind this way and that way. This is the very nature of the mind. So we can't be free of this without being free of ego. So we shouldn't be looking for short-term results when we are following this path. That is, why are we investigating ourselves? We're investigating ourselves to know what we actually are. That is, to be aware of ourselves as we actually are. And our self-investigation is not complete until we are aware of ourselves as we actually are. When we are aware of ourselves as we actually are, ego will thereby be eradicated forever. And when ego is eradicated, all its vasanas, likes, dislikes, desires, and so on, all will be eradicated along with it. This is not to say, but there is not, that we do not, of course, we feel benefited by following this practice, because the more we follow this practice, the more detached we become from these external things. So the desires are still there, but they affect us less. It's difficult to put it exactly in words, but though we may still desire things, we also recognize the fleeting nature of whatever we desire. We know that whatever we may desire is not a solution to our problems. All problems come back to this root problem, ego, because our real nature is infinite happiness. Happiness and satisfaction are one and the same thing. So when I say infinite happiness, I mean infinite satisfaction. So that is our real nature. But when we rise as ego, we limit ourselves as a person, as a body consisting of 5 sheaths. And as this finite entity, we can never experience infinite satisfaction. So dissatisfaction is the very nature of ego. And it's dissatisfaction that gives rise to all these desires and so on. But what we are all ultimately, whatever we may desire, what we are ultimately seeking is that infinite happiness, that infinite satisfaction. Because we don't experience infinite satisfaction, we look for little iotas of satisfaction here and there. And whatever we may achieve, we are not satisfied by anything. So we need to understand desires. We can, if we are following this path, desires will gradually, they will lose their strength gradually. So we will be more and more detached. It's not that the desires will completely disappear, but desires are still there. But I mean, the very way this question is worded, it is clear, McNair, that you see that whether your desires are fulfilled or not fulfilled, they do not, the fulfillment of your desires does not satisfy you. There's no desire whose fulfillment will, of course, we get some little satisfaction when a desire is fulfilled, but that satisfaction is very fleeting, and quickly some other desire will rise in its place. So desire is a form of dissatisfaction. And as I say, dissatisfaction is the very nature of ego. So we are, whatever may arise, whether it's desires or feelings of grief or sadness that you refer to, or thoughts of any kind whatsoever, whatever may arise, to whom does it arise? That doesn't mean we should be questioning ourselves to whom. As Bhagavan said, we should investigate to whom. That is, in order to investigate to whom, we need to understand to whom. All desires everything, whatever appears, desires or sadness or grief or thoughts of any kind whatsoever, they all appear in whose view? In the view of ourself as ego. As I say, when we do not rise as ego, as in sleep, we do not experience any desires, any sadness, any grief, any thoughts, or any problem of any kind whatsoever. But as soon as we rise as ego, all these things arise along with us. So Bhagavan says we need to investigate to whom. That means we need to turn our attention away from whatever appears back towards ourself, the one to whom they appear. And the more we turn our attention towards ourselves, the more we as ego will thereby subside. And where do we subside? We subside back into our being, which is that from which the source from which we have risen. So we shouldn't be disheartened, but we don't get immediate results in the sense of our desires don't all of a sudden vanish. Of course they won't vanish. We've been cultivating these desires, or rather we've been cultivating the vasanas that give rise to these desires, the inclinations that give rise to these desires. We've been cultivating these since time immemorial. That's why Bhagavan, in the 10th paragraph of Nana, Bhagavan says, Tondru Tatu Varakindra Vishaya, even though Vishaya Vasanas, Vishaya Vasanas means inclination, Vishayas means objects or phenomena. So anything other than ourself is a Vishaya. So whatever we may desire is a Vishaya. So even though Vishaya Vasanas are the inclination to experience those objects of our desire. So even though Vishaya Vasanas, which come from time immemorial, that is, these vasanas have been with us in one form or another. The vasanas may change over time, but vasanas, it's the very nature of ego to have Vishaya Vasanas. From the time the hypothetical time when we first rose as ego, from that moment we had Vishaya Vasanas, because the very nature of ego is constantly, as Bhagavan points out in verse 25 of Uludunapadu, grasping form. This is about ego he's talking. Grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. Leaving form, it grasps form. So grasping form is the very nature of ego. And what Bhagavan refers to there as uru, meaning form, is what he refers to here as Vishayas. So all phenomena are forms of one kind or another. And it's the very nature of ego. We cannot rise as ego without grasping form. We cannot stand as ego without grasping form. So it's the Vishaya Vasanas are not ego, but it is the nature of ego to have Vishaya Vasanas. So, as Bhagavan says, even though Vishaya Vasanas, which come from time immemorial, rise in countless numbers like ocean waves, they will all be destroyed when Swarupa Dhyana increases and increases. Swarupa Dhyana, Swarupa means our own real nature. Dhyana means meditation or attentiveness. So Swarupa Dhyana means self-attentiveness. So the only way to overcome these Vishaya Vasanas is by cultivating this practice of Swarupa Dhyana or self-attentiveness. The more we attend to ourselves, that is, the more this self-attentiveness increases, the more the Vishaya Vasanas will lose their strength, and eventually they'll all be destroyed. So we shouldn't be disheartened just because after following this path for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, we still find we have so many desires and so on. That is the very nature of ego. And as Bhagavan said, it is all these will come, even vasanas that we were previously unaware of will rise to the surface of our mind when we're following this practice. So that doesn't mean, just because they write doesn't mean we should follow them. We shouldn't follow them, but we will be aware of all sorts of vasanas arising. So we need to detach ourselves from all these things, from all these desires, and we can detach ourselves from them only by holding on to our own being. In other words, only by being self-attentive. So this is the only solution. You ask, is there a way to apply the process of self-inquiry that would result in a more permanent cessation of a desire? That is the only way to apply the process of self-inquiry, is to persevere in trying to be self-attentive. Self-inquiry or Atma-vichara means nothing but fixing our attention on ourselves, putting our mind on ourselves. So we need to persevere in that, doing it more and more and more. This is the only way. The permanent cessation of desires will happen only when ego is destroyed, which is the final outcome of this process of self-investigation. So there's no, this simple practice of fixing our attention on ourselves. This is the beginning and end of the whole process. There's nothing that we can add to that that will enhance it. Of course, in order to practice this, we need love. But if we didn't have love, that is the amount we practice it is proportional to the amount of love we have. And the love can be cultivated only by persevering in the practice, because the more we practice, the more love we will have to attend to ourselves. So there's no extra teaching beyond this. This is what Bhagavan taught us. Be self-attentive. This is the solution to all problems. And there's nothing we can do to enhance that. All we can do is persevere. And when we find that we lose the enthusiasm, then Bhagavan's teachings are there as to support and encourage us. So whenever we find our mind is going out, getting carried away by things, and we seem to lack the love to turn back within, we should continue studying Bhagavan's teachings, which will be constantly reminding us that all we need to do, and the only solution to all our problems, is to persevere in being self-attentive. So you ask, is there any exercise or technique you can suggest? The only exercise or technique is to persevere in the practice. There's not, you say, in addition to self-inquiry, there are so many other practices, but none of them are as efficacious as self-investigation. And self-investigation doesn't depend on any other practice. So there's no other practice that can enhance self-investigation. We just need to persevere in trying more and more to be self-attentive. And as I say, when our enthusiasm seems to be waning, we should rekindle it by constantly keeping our mind dwelling on Bhagavan's teachings, by reading them or thinking about them. And then you finally ask, does the idea of surrender enter into it? Yes, surrender is that is, we cannot begin to attend to ourselves without thereby surrendering ourselves, because the very nature of ego is to rise, stand, and flourish by attending to forms, by grasping form, as Bhagavan puts it. That means by attending to phenomena, attending to anything other than ourselves. But the same ego, its nature is to subside and dissolve back into its source by attending to itself. So self-attentiveness is itself self-surrender. To the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we are thereby surrendering ourselves. Surrendering ourselves means surrendering this ego. So surrender is absolutely, I mean, the pinnacle of the path of surrender is this practice of self-attentiveness, this practice of self-investigation. Of course, we in addition to, well, it's difficult to put it, that before coming to the path of self-surrender, before coming to the path of self-investigation, we can surrender to some extent. We can't surrender I, but we can surrender mine. We can surrender the mamaccara. Mamaccara means that whatever we consider mine. So in addition to this practice of self-investigation, if we're told we want something in addition to this, cultivating that attitude of surrender. Whatever happens, it's all happening according to Bhagavan's will. So whatever happens, let it happen according to his will. We should cultivate that indifference to whatever is happening, knowing that whatever is happening by Bhagavan's grace for our good. So let anything happen. We need to cease judging things as this is good, that is bad. We need to just accept whatever happens, that is Bhagavan's will. So that attitude of surrender is a great support in this practice. So if at all there's anything that we can do in addition to self-investigation, it is cultivating this attitude of surrender. But this attitude of surrender will take us only so far, because we cannot surrender. It'll take us only so far without self-investigation, because it's only by self-investigation that we can, by an attitude of surrender, we can at least to some extent surrender my desires, my comforts and conveniences, and so on and so forth. Whatever we consider to be mine, we can to some extent surrender it. But the surrender cannot be complete without surrendering I. And without surrendering I, we can't surrender mind completely, because so long as we rise as I, that is the mamaccara, the mindness, comes inevitably along with the ahankara, the I-ness. So though we can reduce the intensity of our desires, we cannot give them up entirely without self-investigation. So cultivating an attitude of indifference, an attitude of surrender, is supplementary, we can say, to this practice of self-investigation, but they really go hand in hand. The more we attend to ourselves, the more we will automatically cultivate that attitude of surrender, that attitude of indifference, detachment from whatever appears. Is that a clear and helpful answer, McNair?
Yes, Michael, thank you. Just one comment. One thing I've noticed when I first started on the path of self-inquiry years ago, it was like a honeymoon period. And the longer it goes, it seems like the more difficult it is to kind of get to the last vestiges of whatever, it's like they're harder to deal with, or the
Yes.
energy for self-investigation gets harder to maintain. But
yes,
the first few years, it's like a honeymoon period.
Yeah. Because at first our practice is relatively superficial, but the deeper we go in the practice, the more the vasanas inside will be churned up and will do everything. I mean, it's the nature of the ego to be swayed by its vasanas. So we'll find more and more distractions arising from within. An analogy I sometimes give, that is actually, as we are progressing in this path, our vasanas are getting weaker, but the resistance they put up becomes stronger and stronger. So an analogy I sometimes give to illustrate this, if hunters are hunting a tiger, and the hunters are all armed with swords and spears, and maybe bows and arrows or whatever, finally, they may reach a point where the tiger is surrounded, and by that time the tiger will have so many wounds, so many spears and wounds from the swords and arrows and things. So the tiger is greatly weakened, but in such a situation, it will fight back more fiercely than ever, in spite of the weakness resulting from all its wounds. The ego is like that. It will resist. That is, the weaker it becomes, the more ferociously it, along with its army of vasanas, will try to resist this. So this path will never be a walk in the park. We have to be serious. The only thing that we need to do is to attend to ourselves. If we attend to ourselves, there's no problem. The problem is we don't have sufficient love to attend to ourselves. Or we may have a certain degree of love to attend to ourselves, but that love is not deep and intense enough. So we attend to ourselves to some extent, but we don't go deep enough. So the deeper we go, the more resistance there will be. But if we persevere, success is certainly assured. As Bhagavan says, all these vasanas will certainly be destroyed when Swarupa Dhyana becomes more and more intense.
Thank you, Michael. You're the best.
I'm not the
you.
best. Bhagavan is the best.
Yeah, okay.
I'm
you're
just
the best.
pointing out what
You're the
Bhagavan
best
has said.
mouthpiece.
He's the vehicle through whom
Yeah, exactly.
Ramana comes. Thank you very much, McNair.
Yeah.
And Sri Ram, I'll get to you in 1 second. I wanted to do a quick follow-up on a part of the question that McNair wrote to you that I didn't hear, at least I didn't hear much of a response. And that is when he said, if self-inquiry does help, it seems to do so only momentarily. There is never full freedom from the desire. Michael, my question about that is this to be expected until ego completely evaporates?
Yes. Because
in other words, we shouldn't expect it in this lifetime, most likely.
Well, we don't know. Let's not think about whether it could be the next minute. It could be next year. It could be after 100 lifetimes. We shouldn't be concerned about that. Because if we're thinking about when will this happen, we are not looking at ourselves. We're looking at some point in the future. So we are already that. It's not something to be attained in the future. So we need to have the attitude. We need to be investigating. We're trying to see what we actually are here and now. That should be our understanding, our attitude when we're practicing this. And of course, the results are momentary because we are holding on to self-attentiveness is only momentary. As soon as we let go of the self-attentiveness, the benefit that we had seemed to achieve, to derive, gets lost. So we need to hold on to this self-attentiveness more and more and more. If we want to extend those moments of benefit, we need to extend the moments of self-attentiveness. Because it's only when we're self-attentive that we're really being benefited.
Excellent. Thank
Because
you.
when we're not being self-attentive, we're attending to something else.
That's right.
And when we're attending to anything else, we are embracing the problems that we say we're trying to get rid of. The truth is we're not trying to get rid of our problems. We're clinging to our problems and saying, oh, I want to get rid of them.
Yeah. I think maybe partly that's because it seems that there's a plan laid out in front of us. If we follow it, that can happen. But as you say, that depends on how much self-attentiveness goes with
exactly.
Yeah, thank you. Sri Ram, you got a question on this same topic.
Michael, Namo Ramana, awesome. Nice to see you again, sir, my friend. Okay, quick question. You said that fixing your attention on ourselves from the beginning to the end, that's the practice.
Yes.
So somebody's fixing attention on the self. So this ultimate inquiry is the only and probably the best non-dual meditation. But in the beginning, there seems to be a duality, fixing attention on the self. That means the self is different. That's why we have to fix attention on it. So what is the metamorphosis? How does it happen? Who is fixing, and does the fixer get dissolved in the process? Does a non-dual turn to non-dual?
We need to understand what the practice is. If we understand, there's no such thing as the self we have to attend to. We have to attend to ourself. That is, the one who is attending needs to attend to itself. So there are no two things there. Because if we are attending to ourselves, if there's duality, then we are not attending to ourselves. There's only one non-dual practice, and that is the practice of self-attentiveness. Because anything else, it entails attending to something other than ourselves. That is duality. And we need to give up this idea that there's something called the self that we need to attend to. This term, the self, is a very misleading term because there's no such thing as the self. There is no self other than ourself. So it's only ourself we need to attend to. So forget about when people write the self with a capital S, they're chasing an imagination. There is no such thing as the self. There is only ourself. And all we need to know is to know ourself. Forget about the self. Know yourself.
So, Michael, the question is witness. Is that instantaneous that you sink yourself in the self? Or is there people call sakshi or witness? And you have mentioned awareness, inquiring about awareness. What does that mean?
There is a lot of confusion about this term sakshi. That is, firstly, as Bhagavan clarified, there are two senses in which the term sakshi is used. If by sakshi you mean the one who is aware, that sakshi is ego. So what is aware of all this is only ego. However, the term sakshi is also applied to our real nature, to Brahman. Brahman is what we actually are. So Brahman is sometimes described as jiva sakshi, the witness of the jiva, or sarva sakshi, the witness of everything. Bhagavan clarified that when it's used in that context, sakshi does not mean the knower. Sakshi means that in the presence of which all these things appear, not in the view of which, because all these things appear only in the view of ego. So sakshi in the sense of the knower, the one who is aware of it, that is ego. When Brahman is described as sakshi, it merely means Brahman is that presence in which all these things, in which ego and everything in the view of ego rises and subsides. So the reason why this term sakshi is used is now as ego, we are fully identified with these five sheaths that constitute the body. That is the physical form of the body, the life that animates it, the prana, the mind that functions within it, and the intellect and will. Mind, intellect, and will, these three things are functioning within it. So these five collectively make up what we take ourselves to be. These are all objects known by us. So the reason it is told you are a sakshi is to help us to distinguish ourselves from everything we take ourselves to be, because everything we take ourselves to be is an object, it is drishya, whereas the witness is drik, that which knows all this. So, and without drik drishya viveka, this distinguishing the knower from the known, we can't even begin this practice of self-investigation. So self-investigation is the practical application of drishya viveka. We need to first distinguish ourselves from everything that is drishya, everything that is experienced, all objects or phenomena. We need to distinguish ourselves from that. Then only we can attend to ourselves. Because if we don't distinguish ourselves from these things, we will be attending to something other than ourselves, thinking we're attending to ourselves. So drishya viveka is very important. If we have drishya viveka, there'll be no idea about I've got to attend to the self with a capital S, or I've got to be the witness. Another thing, people misunderstand this term witness in so many ways. People think, oh, if you just witness everything, if you just observe everything in a detached manner, that is being the witness. That is being ego. That is by trying to observe things in a detached manner, that may have some therapeutic effect. It may help us to be a little bit more detached. So as a beginning practice on the path of meditation, that may be helpful. Like in Buddhism, they have this vipassana meditation where you're witnessing everything. You're witnessing the sensations in the body. You're witnessing whatever's happening. That's all very well as a beginner's practice. But this is what Bhagavan is teaching us is a far more advanced practice. what in this path, what we should witness is only the witness. That is, we, the witness, should witness ourselves. In other words, we should attend only to ourselves. We should be mindful, not mindful of anything other than ourselves, not mindful of anything that's happening, mindful of our own being. So this is the true mindfulness meditation, but it's got the target of the mindfulness is only ourselves, not any other thing.
Rick is next, and then we'll get to our second
Was
question.
that a clear answer?
Yeah, Michael, is very clear. And I like what you said, that this witnessing practice, unfortunately, if we don't go deep on it, then it will make the witness, the ego, stronger.
Yeah, it's as long as we're witnessing anything other than ourselves. That may be a way of detaching ourselves. Being aware of ourselves as something separate from all these things. That's okay. But the reason we are told we are the witness is to turn our attention away from whatever appears, back towards ourselves, the one to whom it appears.
Yes,
Okay,
Michael.
Rick,
Thank
go ahead with your question.
Yeah, Michael, I mean, your words are really hitting home, very, 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 very powerful. And I just want to say a few things, and you can tell me if I'm understanding it correctly or I'm missing the mark. I like your comments about the witness, that it's just an interim step or method, but ultimately that needs to fall away as well.
Well, no, it's a matter of understanding.
Understanding, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
that is,
yes,
we
yes.
are told we
Yes.
are the witness in order to
Right.
distinguish ourselves from everything that is known. But the practice is not to witness anything that is known, but
Yes.
to witness the witness. In other words, attend to ourselves.
Yes, because I must admit, starting out for many years, this fell in the realm of self-help, defeating the purpose, reinforcing the problem. Okay.
Yeah, exactly,
Reinforcing
exactly.
the sense of self, and over time, that's kind of evolved into to something else. You know, a glimpse here and there, and then it kind of evolved into you know, being interested in what I can't describe. You know, like you said, anything that can be known or described ain't you. You know,
Yeah.
and taking that approach. But what I have found, you know, because all words are, it's easy to get caught up in this, what's inquiring, what's the best technique. But for me, I've kind of learned that what matters the most is just the real, sincere, authentic love for truth and what you are. And it can't be learned. It requires deep contemplation on just a couple sentences, deep contemplation. Otherwise, it's just something that's learned and believed, and it's a problem. Also, would you agree that far as inquiry, in a sense, the only thing that wants to seek would be ego, you know, really. So it's, you know, there's nothing phenomenally can tell us what we are, the noumenal. Okay, nothing objective can actually tell us anything about. It's a different kind of finding, different kind of seeking than looking for my car keys. You know.
Yes, yes. We are not looking for anything unknown.
Yes.
We are not looking for anything other than ourselves. We're not looking for, we're looking at.
Yes.
Look at ourselves.
Nice.
Look at
Nice.
our own being.
Yes. Because I've often heard in circles, and it strikes me wrong that awareness knows itself through objects. And I see that not being a correct understanding. It knows itself directly. Would you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Objects, the awareness that knows objects is ego.
Yes.
Ego is
Yes.
not the real awareness. Ego is a false awareness. The real awareness is the pure awareness I am. Ego is the adjunct conflated awareness, I am this body. It's not some second awareness, but it's the same awareness mixed and conflated with adjuncts. And only in the view of ego do all other things appear.
Yeah.
So the
That-
awareness that knows all this is ego. Only when ego turns its attention away from everything that it knows, back towards itself, to see who am I, the one who is aware of all these things, then only will ego subside. That is, the adjuncts will drop off and we'll merge back in our own being, the pure I
Yeah.
am.
Because sometimes it's languaging, because I don't see ego. I see the nature of ego is resistance. So I don't see ego resisting. It's just able to, it discovers, you could say, its own limitations. Perhaps, again, words are, you know,
Ego
words
is
can be a problem.
resisting because of its desires. But ego is not just resisting. Who is experiencing that resistance? The I who is experiencing the resistance is ego.
Yes, yes. Would you agree that ego could also be, not say, another word could be ignorance? Would be a synonymous word with ego?
As ego is ignorance in what sense? It is ignorance in the sense that ego is a false awareness of ourselves. That is, as ego, we know I am, which is real, which is true. But we don't know ourselves just as I am. We know ourselves as I am Rick, I am Michael.
Right, sure, right.
That is ego. So the I that identifies itself with anything other than itself, that is ego.
Right.
And only in the view of that ego, all other things appear.
Yes.
Rick,
I
we
am.
want to move
Everything
on now,
rests.
if it's okay.
Okay.
And thank
Thanks,
you very much, Michael, and thank you very much, Rick, for the questions. And the second question, I don't know if we get to more than two, normally we don't, is from Raphael Stoneman, and I just made a check. He's not with us right now, so I'll remind him to look at the videotape on YouTube. Raphael Stoneman says, Michael, to you, would it be accurate to say that once Mananasa happened to the mind of Ramana when he was 16, that from that moment on, all actions of the body, known as Venkatraman, the 16-year-old kid, and then later Sri Ramana, are 100% exclusively the actions of God or the absolute or of pure awareness. And if part of your answer is that God or pure awareness never acts, then who is the actor, since ego was no longer present in that equation?
Yes, that is, when Manonasa happens, that means ego is eradicated. So the body that was called Venkatraman at that time and later came to be known as Sri Ramana, that body means not just the physical form of that body, but the mind, intellect, and will that were functioning within that body, all the actions of those instruments, they cannot be actions of anything other than God, because there's no ego there. So it is, they're actions of God. However, it is also true to say what God actually is pure awareness, and pure awareness never acts. That is true. But because in pure awareness, there's no body, no mind, no world, nothing. There's just pure being. So it's in our view, in the view of ego, that the body and mind of Bhagavan, Bhagavan Ramana seem to exist and seem to do all these actions. So we cannot, since we see these actions being done, we see the products of those actions. We see the teachings of Bhagavan, his own original writings, his Nana, Uludu Napadu, Padeshundia, Arunachaksharamlai. All these are the products of actions of the mind. All those actions can only be attributed to God. But since God is pure awareness, pure being, how can we attribute actions to God? That is answered by Bhagavan in the 15th paragraph of Nana. What Bhagavan uses a beautiful term in that 15th paragraph. What he says is, he says everything is happening, all the 5 divine functions, that is the creation of the whole universe, the sustenance, the dissolution, the tarodhana. Tarodhana means the veiling or concealment, and grace. All these happen how? By just the, he says, isan sanidana visesha matratal. That means by just the special nature of the presence of God. So God does everything without doing anything. Just by being as he is, everything happens as it's meant to happen. In an earlier paragraph, in the 13th paragraph, he says everything, since one Parameshwara Shakti is driving all karyas. All karyas means whatever needs to be done or to happen, or whatever ought to be done or to happen. These are what he means by karyas in this case. They are all being driven by that one Parameshwara Shakti. Shakti means power. Parama means supreme. Ishwara means God or the ruler. So the supreme ruling power. It is driving all these, but how is it driving it? Not by doing anything, but just by being as it is. So Bhagavan, that is what we see outwardly in the form of Bhagavan Ramana, is nothing but our own self. We are seeing ourselves appearing outwardly in that form in order to give us these teachings. Sorry. In order to give us these teachings to turn back within. So all the actions of Bhagavan are definitely the actions of God, because there's no Bhagavan other than God. But he does all these things without doing anything, just by being as he is. Why does his being as he is make everything happen as it's meant to happen? Because his very being is love. Being and love are one and the same thing. So because he alone exists, he doesn't see anything other than himself. So he loves everything as himself. So his love is infinite. He has infinite love for us, but he doesn't love us as the person that we mistake ourselves to be. He loves us as we actually are. So by just being what he actually is, he makes everything happen as it's meant to happen. That is how the divine, how grace works, not by doing anything, but just by being. And by its mere being, everything happens as it's meant to happen.
Very good, Michael. He's not here to ask any questions about your comment, but you seem to explain it very, very well. He loves everything as himself when you're referring to Ramana very briefly. Is that something that I'm to expect to be always in every case projection that he's loving outside of himself?
He's not loving anything out. I said he loves everything as himself.
Right.
Because he sees everything as himself. He doesn't see everything. He sees only himself. Okay. What we see as everything is what he sees as himself. So it's from our perspective that we say, it's like if you're walking with Bhagavan on a path, something is like in the dim light of dusk, you're walking with Bhagavan. You see something on the path ahead of you, you think it's a snake. Bhagavan knows it's a rope. Mm-hmm. So what you are seeing as a snake, he is seeing as the rope. But so we can say metaphorically, you are seeing the snake as the rope as a snake. He's seeing the snake as a rope. Okay. But when we say he sees the snake as a rope, what does it mean? It means what we see as a snake is what he sees as a rope. Mm-hmm. Likewise, what we see as everything is what he sees as himself. So he doesn't love anything outside himself, because there is nothing outside himself. He alone is.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's where I sometimes get confused.
That's why, as himself, people think you have to see everything as God. How can you see everything as God? So long as you see everything, you're not seeing God. If you
Yeah.
want to see everything as God, firstly, you need to see yourself as God. And when you see yourself as God, you will see only God exists, nothing else, nothing else. There's nothing else to see as God.
Yeah. Excellent.
So it's only from our perspective that it is said, but the jnani sees everything as God or as Brahman.
Yeah.
But the
Thank you,
jnani
Michael.
doesn't see everything. The jnani sees the only one thing there is, which is Brahman, which is himself. I mean, but that is the jnani. There's no
Thank you.
jnani other than Brahman.
Mhm. Michael, we're going to move on to the third question that you selected for today from Mohan Bhai Bad. Question from a Ramana follower for whom English is a second language. I'm going to read it as written, and you and I discussed this before. The ego is one, and Bhagavan Ramana's ego enlightened and attained the Jivan Mukta state. All other egos or personal also should get that same state of consciousness. His question is, why is this not happening that way, according to Bhagavan's darshan philosophy?
Because this is a misunderstanding of what Bhagavan taught us. When Bhagavan says ego is one, who is that one ego? The one ego is the one who is aware of all this. So long as we see Bhagavan as someone other than ourselves, that is the ego we imagine exists or doesn't exist in others, exists only in our view. There's only one in a dream. In a dream, the dreamer experiences itself as a person in the dream. And in the view of that dreamer, it is one person among so many. Because the dreamer mistakes itself to be a person, it thinks every person is like it seeing the world, but it is not the person in the dream who is seeing the world. It is the dreamer who is seeing it. So the dreamer is ego. So the one who asked this question is the one ego. So in order to understand Bhagavan's teachings, there's Ekajiva Vada. That Ekajiva Vada means the principle that there's just one, the contention that there's just one jiva. We cannot, so long as we talk, in the same question, it begins, if ego is one, and it goes on all other egos. The other egos exist only in the view of that one ego. So who is that one ego? That which is aware of itself as I, and which is knowing everything else. So to understand this Ekajiva Vada, we should stop trying to look outwards and trying to understand the world or understand the so-called other egos or Bhagavan's ego or anything like that. The Bhagavan's ego which died, all that exists only in the view of this one ego who is aware of all this. So the correct this Ekajiva Vada is not to be applied outwardly. So long as we're looking outwards, for all intents and purposes, there's a multiplicity of people and every person is an ego. So there seems to be a multiplicity of egos. But we need to think more deeply about this. Yes, there seem to be so many egos. This world is full of so many egos in human form and also in other forms. Cows and horses and elephants and dogs and cats, there's an ego in all of them. From our point of view, from the point of view of the one ego who sees them all. So how is this teaching of Ekajiva, one ego, to be applied? Who am I, the one ego in whose view all these things exist? All these things seem to exist. That is it. So the purpose of this Ekajiva teaching is to turn our attention back to ourselves, not to ask questions about others. If we start trying to apply the Ekajiva teaching to others, we've misunderstood the Ekajiva teaching, because the Ekajiva teaching is the others exist only in the view of one ego. Who is that one ego? The one to whom all this appears.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
I see
This is a
Sri Ram-
question so many people ask because people don't think deeply enough. What does it mean? If there's only one ego, how can that ego be anything other than me? That's how we should take it. So who am I, that one ego, in whose view all these, so many other egos seem to exist?
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to squeeze in one more question before we get to the open forum where people can pose questions from the floor. And I see Sri Ram's got his question up, so just hold off on that, Sri Ram. I'm going to, because Nikhil Kriplani is here with us live. I'd like to take his question as our final question from viewers who had sent in their questions earlier. And he asks you, Michael, my understanding of these teachings is almost entirely at the intellectual level. And again, I think that also goes for a lot of us, with very
All of us.
occasional glimpses, with very occasional glimpses into what is seemingly the true state of reality. Is this body-mind effort, meaning meditation, contemplation, etc., another manifestation of consciousness? If so, why did it select this body-mind organism to strive? And finally, given the suffering with incorrect associations with the body, why do any body-mind organisms rise at all?
Okay. What is striving is not the body-mind organism. It is we as ego who identify this body-mind organism as I. It's we who are striving. And when you say a manifestation of consciousness, what do you mean by consciousness? That is, what actually exists is one consciousness, one awareness. That is the awareness I am. That is pure awareness. So in the view of pure awareness, there is no manifestation at all. There is just pure being. That is pure being and pure consciousness are one and the same thing. Manifestation, whatever manifests, that means whatever appears only in the view of ego. Ego is a form of consciousness, but not the real consciousness. In classical Advaita, the pure consciousness is called Chit. The ego is called Chit-abhasa. Chit-abhasa means that abhasa means a likeness or a semblance. So it's a semblance of awareness. It also, a secondary meaning of abhasa is reflection, because when you look in the mirror and you see your reflection in the mirror, that reflection is not you. That face you're seeing in the mirror is not your face. It is a likeness of your face. So the basic meaning of Chit-abhasa, though it's usually translated as a reflection, it's important to understand that the basic meaning is it's a seeming awareness. So ego, though it is a form of awareness, it's not awareness as it actually is. It's only a semblance of awareness. So the awareness in which everything manifests is only ego. And the body-mind effort, this appears only in that view of ego, the Chit-abhasa, the seeming awareness. So the question, why do body-mind organisms rise? Everything arises because of the first rising. What is the first rising? The first rising is the rising of ourself as ego, because it's only in the view of ourself as ego that all other things appear. So when we wake up from sleep, for example, or begin to dream, we as ego rise and we project all this. We project a world full of so many body-mind organisms who are going so many problems. But what is actually undergoing the problem is not the body-mind organism that we take ourselves to be. This body was born one day, it's going to die one day. This body is jada. Jada means it's completely devoid of awareness. So the body has no problem. Even mind, in the sense of all the thoughts and feelings and everything, they have no problem, because your thoughts don't know themselves. The feelings don't know themselves. Who is it who knows the thoughts? Who is it who feels the feelings? That is I. That is ego. So the whole problem is for this first rising, ego. And because we rise as ego, we are dissatisfied, because what we actually are is infinite being, which is infinite happiness, infinite love. But having risen as ego, we have limited ourselves, because as ego, we're always aware of ourselves as I am this body. So having seemingly limited ourselves as this finite form, we cannot experience the infinite happiness that we actually are. So striving is the very nature of ego. If we're not striving for spiritual attainment, we'll be striving for worldly attainments, because we cannot, as ego, avoid striving. There are some pseudo-Advaita teachers who say, give up the search, give up striving. Your striving is the problem. We cannot give up striving without giving up ego, because the very nature of ego is to strive. If you tell people to stop striving for spiritual, for anything spiritual, they'll be striving for worldly things instead. So these are meaningless instructions given by people who have no idea what they're talking about. Striving is the very nature of ego. So the question is, towards what should we direct our striving? Rather than striving to know anything else, to experience anything else, we should strive to know, who am I? That is the path Bhagavan has taught us, because only by knowing what we actually are will ego thereby be destroyed. And when ego is destroyed, there'll be no body, mind, organisms, no manifestation. There'll only be the pure being consciousness, Satchit, but we actually are. That alone is what is real. So the question, given the suffering with incorrect associations with the body, why do any body, mind, organisms rise at all? That is, as I say, the body, mind, organisms, these are objects. These are things that we identify as I. So they rise because we have risen as ego. Why does ego rise? That is the one question which cannot be answered. Because as Bhagavan said, when people ask, Bhagavan, why is this ego risen? Why is there Maya? Bhagavan said, first find this ego, and then bring it here, and then we can find out why it's risen. If we look for it, there's no such thing as ego to be found, because we seem to be ego only when we're looking away from ourselves at other things. When we turn our attention back to see ourselves, if we actually turn our attention fully back to see ourselves alone, we will find there's no such thing as ego at all. There's only pure awareness, pure consciousness. There's no manifestation of ego or anything else. So all rising, the first rising is the rising of ourself as ego. And everything else rises only in the view of ego. So we need to go back to the root. The root rising is the rising of ourself as ego. If we investigate this ego, we will then find that we have never risen. And since we have never risen, nothing else has ever risen.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. I was going to say, I understand what you're saying in terms of the striving being the nature of ego. And if we're
Yes.
going to strive towards going towards our being and our true consciousness,
Yes.
versus the outside world and all the manifestations.
Yes.
And that's the sort of essence of Bhagavan's teaching. It's more of a comment for me. It's like where I am right now it does feel a little helpless sometimes, because where is the end and why is it happening and why am I here? There's a certain a feeling of helplessness
the end
there.
is where
Yeah.
the beginning is. We cannot find where we will end until we find where we begun. Where we begun is our own being. That is, as ego, we have risen from our being. So our being is both the beginning and the end.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Right.
And thank you, Nikhil. I really appreciate it too. And I'm glad you're here to hear your actual response and pose your final question. Real quickly, Michael, you said a couple of minutes ago that because we rise as ego, we are dissatisfied. So in other words, you're saying that we're dissatisfied from the get-go. It sounds like the deck is incredibly stacked against us at our illusory perceived birth. It's amazing that this many people find Ramana's teachings to help us to see that get turned around. But we're a drop in the ocean of humanity. Does that ever strike you as being somewhat odd that the odds are so heavily weighted against everyone?
We are all dissatisfied. That is, as I said earlier, dissatisfaction is the very nature of ego. But ego is also Maya, and Maya is very tricky. We are dissatisfied because something seems to be lacking in ourselves. Because something is lacking, seems to be lacking in ourselves, we think the solution is something outside ourselves. That's why we all look for, because I'm not happy, that the happiness seems to be absent in me. So if I want to get happiness, I have to get it from outside of me. So the nature of ego is to constantly strive outwardly, constantly look for happiness in things other than itself. Until Bhagavan comes along and tells us, no, happiness doesn't lie in external things. Happiness is your own real nature. Even though Bhagavan says that, how many are ready to stop and consider it and see the truth in those words? Most people are far too busy looking for satisfaction outside. So they will just not be attracted to this. So it is, there's a nice saying my mother often used to say, which I really like, there but for the grace of God go I. So it is only by Bhagavan's grace that we've somehow been drawn to this path.
Yet this dream, this Maya, seems to be set up or engineered in such a way that almost nobody, figuratively speaking, discovers Ramana's teachings.
Yes, that is the nature of Maya. Maya wouldn't be doing its job. But what is Maya? Maya is not something outside. Maya, we ourselves are Maya. That we as ego are Maya.
So let me ask you a really stupid question. I excel in this, and I've asked this before, maybe not of you though. Is it Michael James in whose dream I'm appearing to have this discussion? Or is it my dream in whom Michael's appearing to have this discussion?
How come Michael be the dreamer? How can Ted be the dreamer? Michael and Ted are both a part of the dream. In whose view do Ted and Michael exist? The one in whose view all this exists, that one is the dreamer.
Mm.
We need to distinguish ego from the person ego takes itself to be. Ted is not ego, Michael is not ego. Ego is the one who is aware of itself as I am Ted, or I am Michael, or I am whoever. So there's one I in whose view all of this seems to exist.
Brahman?
Hmm?
Brahman?
No. In the view of Brahman, none of this exists.
Self?
No. Only ego. It's only in the view of ego that all this seems to exist. So the I that is aware of the appearance of all this is not Brahman. It's not what we actually are. It is just this ego, which is not what we actually are. Because ego is what we actually are, is the pure awareness I am. But ego is that pure awareness mixed and conflated with adjuncts. So the reality of ego is Brahman. But it's not in the view of Brahman that all this exists. It's only in the view of ego.
Well,
Ego is the dreamer.
I'm sure this is a very elementary question for Ramana people. Thank you for allowing me to present it yet one more time.
Yeah.
And each time I do, it gets clearer and clearer. Thank you. Now it's time to go to the people here who have questions for you. We've got 45 minutes left. Everybody notice that both Sri Ram and Rick have their hands up, their virtual hands up. If you want to ask a question, just do that on any subject, and I'll get to you in the order that the hands come up. So we're going to try to make our questions brief and get to as many people as possible. And Sri Ram, you're first.
Okay, awesome. Michael, awesome. Thank you very much. I think what you described just now, let me summarize what you said, my understanding. There is only one ego, and in view of all that ego, thousands of egos exist, theirs, yours, mine, and so on. And the ego is not same as Brahman, because Brahman doesn't do anything, doesn't see anything as akarta. Ego is the one ego. Is that same as Eka Jivavad? And one thing is, there are two vadas in scriptures. One is Jiva Srishti and Ishvara Srishti. It's described by Vidyaranya that we see the world, our view, and Brahma or whoever, Ishvara sees it, million people. So is Jiva Srishti what Ishvara Srishti, same as Jiva Srishti? That's always confused me. Or is Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi's Drishti, which is as a self, different than that? Because Bhagavan also said Jiv Jagat Jagdishwara. He also hugged the Murti of Arunachaleshwara and said, my Father, by thy command I have come. So is that for our education? Where does it fit? Jiva Srishti, Ishwara Srishti, and this Eka Jivavad.
Okay.
How does it?
Eka Jivavada and one ego, it means the same. The
Okay.
Jiva is ego. Eka means one. So Eka Jiva means one ego. Within Advaita, there are many different levels of explanation. Different explanations are appropriate for different questions. So people ask so many different questions, different answers have to be given. So one of the things that is sometimes said in some sastras is God's creation, Ishvara Srishti, is perfect. The problem lies only in Jiva Srishti. In other words, there's no problem in the world, it's how we see it. That is a teaching that is given at a certain level. But Bhagavan's teachings, by and large, are at a deeper level than that. Because in Bhagavan's teachings, Ishvara Srishti exists only in the view of Jiva. So the only Srishti there is Jiva Srishti. Ishvara is just pure being. Ishvara doesn't do anything. But in the view of Jiva, there seems to be a God out there who seems to have created all this. But that's only in the view of the Jiva. Because Bhagavan's central teaching is Drishti Srishti Vada. That is, within Advaita, there are three ways of explaining things. The grossest and most popular view is what is called Srishti Drishti Vada. That is, according to Srishti Drishti Vada, from Srishti Drishti Vada simply means, but what is created, something is created before we see it. So all scientific theories of creation are Srishti Drishti Vada of various kinds. Almost all religious theories of creation also are Srishti Drishti Vada. That is, everyone generally is very happy to accept that the world exists independent of our perception of it. So the world is there and we come along and we see it. That is the usual view. So Advaita, there are explanations within Advaita that accommodate this view. So according to, this is the crudest form of explanation given in Advaita. According to that, there is just one Brahman. But that Brahman has a power called Maya. And when Brahman and that power of Maya join together, the result is Ishvara. And Ishvara then creates all this. And they give so many things, a lot of these Sankhya ideas about Hiranyagarbha and this and that. And so many, it's all very complicated, far too complicated for a dull head like me. So Fortunately for us, Bhagavan didn't burden us with all these complex theories. Bhagavan said very simply, the world seems to exist because you see it. That's why he begins the very first verse of Ulujunapatu, Nam Ulahum Kandalal, because we see the world. So why are teachings necessary? Because we've risen as ego and consequently see the world. So Bhagavan's teaching is drishti shrishti. Drishti shrishti means there is no creation independent of perception. The classic example for that is dream. In dream, there's no world existing out there. When we begin to dream, we don't enter some other world and dwell for a while in that world and then leave that world and come back to this world. That the dream world exists only in our mind. That the dream world doesn't exist independent of our perception of it. Only when we see it, it seems to exist. According to the Drishti Shrishti Vada in Advaita, this waking state is no different from dream. This is what Bhagavan taught us. So this waking state is just another dream. That means there's one dreamer, and in the view of that one dreamer, all these things are happening. And this world has no existence independent of our perception of it. That's why Bhagavan said, in sleep, there is no mind, no body, no world, nothing. But all these things seem to exist only in waking or dream. So, Drishti Shrishti Vada, that is according to Shrishti Drishti Vada, the popular view of Advaita, that is compatible with Nana Jiva Vada. Nana Jiva Vada means the contention that there are many jivas. That is, if the world has already been created, when we're born into this world, there are so many other jivas. There's our parents and our brothers and sisters and our friends and all the other, so many billion people in the world and so many jivas in non-human forms, in the form of cows and horses and dogs and cats and donkeys and so on, monkeys and all these. So that is Shrishti Drishti. So Shrishti Drishti and Nana Jiva, that is each imply the other. If there are many jivas, then the world has to exist independent of any one jiva. Drishti Shrishti implies Ekajiva Vada, because in dream, there's only one dreamer. We see so many people in dream, but we don't think whether those people, when we wake up from a dream, have all those people I saw in my dream, have they also woken up or are they still dreaming? We never think like that. But because I'm often talking about these things, I often dream that I'm talking about these things. And a few days ago, I had a dream. I was climbing up a hill. And as I was climbing up the hill, there were some people coming down. And they greeted, I greeted. And when I came to the top of the hill, there was an ocean in front of me. Not an ocean down there, ocean there. So how do I climb up the hill and there's an ocean there? Then I understood, oh, this can't be real. This must be a dream. And then I thought, I wonder whether the people who were coming down the hill, whether they also saw this. And then once I corrected myself, what a foolish thing. If this is a dream, those people existed only in my dream. So I was thinking all these things in my mind. So that is in a dream, though we see many other people, and while we're dreaming, those other people seem to be seeing exactly the same world as us. And if you ask anyone in this dream, can you see that tree there? Can you see the ocean? Can you see the houses? Can you see the cars and whatever? They'll say, yes, of course we see it. But that's all only in our view. So Bhagavan's teaching is Drishti Shrishti Vada. Even this is not the ultimate truth. The ultimate truth Bhagavan made clear is ajata. According to ajata, no ego has ever risen. And therefore, no world has ever risen. What is alone is as it is. Ajata means non-born. Nothing has come into existence. Na-nirodha, nothing is destroyed. Na-chotpati, there's nothing. But why has nothing been is nothing ever destroyed? Because nothing has ever come into existence. That is ajata. That is the ultimate truth, Bhagavan said. But Bhagavan was very clear, ajata is not a teaching. Because a teaching is necessary only when there's a problem. In ajata, there's no problem. And in ajata, there's no one who needs any teaching, and there's no one to teach anything. There is only ourselves, pure being. So what Bhagavan has taught us, the Drishti Shrishti Vada, that doesn't mean the world exists in Bhagavan's view. But because the world exists in our view, Bhagavan says, yes, but all this exists because you see it. So to whom do all these things appear? That is what we need to investigate. And if we investigate to whom do all these things appear, that means turning our attention away from whatever appears back towards ourselves, one to whom it all appears. By turning our attention back to ourselves, we as ego will thereby subside. And when we subside and dissolve back in our being, and thereby know ourselves as we actually are, we will know that we have never risen as ego, and therefore nothing has ever risen. And therefore the ultimate experience will be ajata, but nothing has ever, there never was any ego. But for the time being, so long as we see the world, we can't say there's no ego, because if there's no ego, then to whom does this world appear? It's only to ourself as ego that the world appears. Is that a clear answer to your question, Sri Ram?
It is very, very, it's awesome. It's like thousands of us seeing the snake in a dark.
Yes.
And only Bhagavan knows there is no snake. And only Bhagavan has seen the light. So we all are fighting over the snake until we become his state. Then we know there never was a snake.
Bhagavan teaches us, all those thousands of people who see the snake exist only in your view. So we need to investigate, who am I who see this snake and the thousands of people who are also seeing the snake?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have one more additional question, Michael. You had mentioned that the self-inquiry, as we progress, there may be some benefit and there is some recognition and your desires dwindle, etc., vasana. But I've heard that
I didn't say there may be some
revelation...
benefit. Anyone who seriously practices this will begin to experience the benefit, because though our problems don't come to an end, the problems seem less problematic. That is, the reality that we give to all these problems diminishes. So we are able to recognize more and more clearly as we go deeper in this, that this is all just a passing show. None of it is real. So definitely we experience benefit while doing it, but this is not the ultimate benefit. The ultimate benefit is where we who are investigating ourselves cease to exist as a result of our self-investigation.
Like the snake slowly begins to fade until it's completely gone?
No, the snake is still there, but you're less and less afraid of it. You're less and less concerned with it. Okay, if it's a snake, let it bite me. This body is transitory, so it's going to die one day. If it's going to die of a snake bite, if that's its destiny, let it die of a... So we'll be unconcerned about these things. It's not that the world will slowly fade, dissolving in some light or something. The world will still... So long as we rise as ego, the world will seem to be there. But we'll be less and less concerned about it. We'll be less and less fooled by its seeming reality.
I use the word it dissipates before our very eyes. The more we're on this path, the world just seems to slowly loosen its grip on us and slowly starts.
It's not that the world if the world isn't so long as we rise as ego, world won't disappear. But we are less and less concerned about it.
That's it.
It will seem less and less real to us.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
We
Go
find
ahead.
it more and more difficult to convince us, though we still take it to be real, we can see we have no reason to take this to be real. Though it seems to be real, there's no basis for this seeming reality.
And that is what I'm finally starting to recognize
Yeah.
more clearly than ever with your help. Thank you. And Sri
Yeah.
Ram, thank you too.
Awesome.
Go
Thank
over
you.
to
Awesome.
Rick now. You've been patient there. What's your question for Michael?
Yeah, Michael, real quick, again, I find it's very profound. I find your, I think it's important that the terminology we use, very often these non-dual terms are different that are used in the, Webster dictionary, like ego, for example. Your explanation of ego, that there's one ego, is extremely profound. When I look at it that way, I mean that's a huge statement, because it's typically, psychiatrists would use a different, would describe ego as something that's personal and so forth. But when we say ego,
what does ego mean? Ego means I. It's a Greek and a Latin word, but means I. But generally, when we use the word ego, we mean the personal
Right.
I. What is this personal I? That is the I that identifies itself as I am this person.
Right. But it's not synonymous with I am, correct?
No,
ego.
because ego is that which is aware of itself as I am this person.
Yes. Now, is it synonymous?
Can I just finish?
Sure.
The heart of ego, the reality of ego, is I am. That is, as ego, we are always aware I am. But we are not aware of ourselves as just I am. We're aware of ourselves as I am Rick, I am Michael, I am whoever. So
that sense of identity.
It's that identity.
Does it have any correlation with perception itself?
Yes. Who is the perceiver? The perceiver is the one who experiences itself as I am Rick.
But assuming I've transcended that, I'd really there's just perceiving.
Then there's no perception. You can't have perception with the ego is the perceiver. Without ego, there's no perception. You can't have perception without a perceiver.
That's a significant statement. You can't have perception without a perceiver.
And who is the perceiver?
The ego.
Yes.
Ego. That's a significant statement. Wow. So ultimately, another word I was going to ask you, what you explained, very helpful as far as the I am and, being consciousness and all that. But the word absolute, is that ever used, or is that, do you see awareness and consciousness being kind of equal? Because
everything is relative. So long as you have multiplicity, everything within that multiplicity is relative.
Right.
Absolute means the state in which there's only one.
Yeah.
In which there is no other. That alone can be called absolute.
Right. Does the teaching describe anything, I hate to use the word higher, but higher than the I am?
No.
Okay.
What is the difference between I am and I am Rick? I am Rick is an identity.
Yes.
I am is your being.
Right.
Your being is what is real. Your identity is what is false.
Right. It'd be more accurate to say I am God.
No.
No.
It would be more accurate to say I am I.
Would it be more
we are
accurate
nothing
to say
other than our
I?
being.
I am I. Yes, being I related I to kind of God or the ultimate.
But then we think of God. So long as we talk of God, God seems to be something other than ourselves.
Right. Separate.
There is no God other than I, and no I other than God.
Yeah.
God alone is I.
Yeah. Terminology is important.
But if we say, so long as so long as I think I'm Michael, if I go around saying I am God, I'm equating Michael with God.
Yeah,
That is meaningless. So I
Yeah,
can't be both
yeah.
Michael and God. I have to take, I
Right.
have to choose.
Right. And we often talk about the three different states, dreaming, sleeping, and
Yeah.
awake.
Waking.
But those are just positions from a personal perspective, right? They're not
From the
real.
perspective of ego.
Yes, yes. So
But
ultimately,
ego exists only in two of those three states. Ego exists
Yeah.
only in, or seems
Right.
to exist. Ego doesn't never
Right,
actually exist.
Right.
Ego seems to exist in
Right.
waking and dream.
Right.
Rick, thank you.
Sleep,
Rick,
sleep is our real state. But it's from the perspective of ego in waking or dream, sleep seems to be a temporary state because sleep seems to have been interrupted by waking or dream. So it's only from the perspective of ego in waking or dream that sleep seems to be a third state. And a state of limited duration. But actually, when we know ourselves as we actually are, we will find that sleep is eternal and it's the only state there is.
we got
I noticed you use the word seems and appears a lot for good reason, and I love that.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's all we can say. That's all we can say about it.
Yeah.
The only thing that we can say that it actually exists is I. I exist. I am.
Rick,
Because-
thank you very much for your questions. We're going to
Thanks,
move
Michael.
on to Melissa in 1 second. I just want to say that so far in this program, my takeaway message is what you said just a couple of minutes ago. It's more accurate to say, rather than to say I am God, which I always thought was the ultimate, to say I am I, since God refers to, or it sounds like it refers to something outside of self.
Yeah.
So thank you for stressing
That's
that.
why
I think a lot of
the Ramana Mahavakya is I am I. But
Thank you.
unfortunately, most of Bhagavan's teaching, devotees are blind to what Bhagavan has said. Bhagavan said, use this term I am I so often, but it's been translated in English as I-I.
Mhm.
Because in Tamil and Sanskrit, if you want to say A is B, you just say AB. Is understood. So if you want to say I am Ted, you say I Ted, and it's understood. Am is understood there. So when Bhagavan says nan or aham, it means I am I. But people I don't know how people were blind to it. One person started mistranslating it as I, and everyone has followed suit.
Not quite everyone, because before I became aware of Ramana's teachings to the degree I feel closely drawn to them today, long time, several decades follower of Sri Satya Sai Baba, who often said to people, simply say after me, I am God, I am God, I am no different from God. That became tattooed on my arm, and it made perfect sense to me because he was in accord, it seemed, on every level with Ramana's teachings. But you point out the distinction as to why that may not be necessary.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Melissa, you've got a question that you gave to us on chat, which I liked.
Can I just say one more thing on that?
Okay.
That is in the Upanishads, it is said, Tattvamasi, you are that. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. Why do they say so? Because until we come across such teachings, we're looking for things outside ourselves. We're looking for happiness outside ourselves. We're looking for knowledge outside ourselves. We're looking for God. We're looking for Brahman, whatever we call it, the truth, the reality. We're looking for it outside ourselves. So it is necessary for the Upanishads to say, you are that. That is to stop us, to divert our attention away from looking outside back to looking within. So there's a reason why we are taught, these are what are called the Mahavakyas. There are 4 Mahavakyas that reveal what is called Jiva Brahmaikya, the oneness of Jiva and Brahman. So those 4 Mahavakyas are Tattvamasi, you are that. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. I am Atma Brahman, this self is Brahman. Prajnanam Brahman, awareness is Brahman. So these are all intended to point out the oneness of ourself and Brahman. That is, that we are nothing other than Brahman. These teachings are necessary, but Bhagavan has gone one step further, because that is, Bhagavan isn't denying the need for these teachings, because so long as we're looking outwards, we need to be told what you're looking for outside is within you. You yourself are that. So that teaching is necessary, but that is not the ultimate teaching. Because if I begin meditating, I am that, I am Brahman, my attention is being split between two things, I and some idea I have about Brahman. That is,
Yes.
until we know what we actually are, Brahman is just an idea for us.
Mhm.
So we are splitting our attention between two things, I am Brahman. But actually, all we need to do, Bhagavan says, in verse 32 of Ulludunapadu, Bhagavan says, when the Vedas say you are that, what should our, yeah, I'm paraphrasing now, because Bhagavan put it more in a more compact way, but basically what verse 32 implies, when the Vedas say you are that, what should our reaction be? Or if I am that, then what am I? That is the aim of those Mahavakyas, is to turn our attention away from some that outside back towards ourselves. So Bhagavan says, instead of investigating, knowing and being what we actually are by investigating what am I, thinking I am not this body, I am that, is due to weakness of mind. So the aim of the Mahavakyas is to turn our attention back towards ourselves. But the final experience, when we know ourselves as we actually are, we will not know I am Brahman. We will just know I am I. Because there's no Brahman other than I. So Bhagavan made it clear that this is the ultimate truth, is what is our real identity? Our real identity is not I am Brahman. Our real identity is I am I. In other words, I'm nothing other than my own being.
I have a lot of people who are really brand new on the path, who aren't critical, who aren't negative, but they have some questions that are worth asking on this same vein. Self-inquiry is by nature the act of looking inward. A question is, and don't laugh at this because it's so common, sometimes I just wonder, how much time should I spend looking inward is a question that comes to me. What is there to investigate about myself that I don't already know is a second question. How long should I keep doing this is a third question. I don't know the correct answer to give folks who ask those questions that is satisfying.
You have to continue looking within until you see yourself as you actually are.
Well put. Thank you. Melissa, you've got your question. Go ahead.
And we all know ourselves. There's nobody who doesn't know I am. There's never a moment when we do not know I am. But now we know ourselves as I am this body, I am this person. So we have, as Bhagavan said, jnana is not a new knowledge to be attained. If jnana were a new knowledge to be attained, what is newly attained will be lost. But that jnana is the ever-present awareness I am. Why we need to know I am as it is, because only when we know ourselves as we actually are, will this false identity, I am this or I am that, be removed. Because ego is a false awareness of ourselves. False awareness means an awareness of ourselves as something other than what we actually are. We need to know ourselves as we actually are in order to destroy ego.
Mm-hmm. At which point we would be always with ourselves.
Yes, well, we are always with ourselves, even now, but we just, as ego, we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are, because we're aware of ourselves as something other than what we actually are.
Right, and I put it in simplistic ways. It's because I'm fogged over. The self I really am is
Yes.
fogged over from the
The
self I
fog,
think I am.
the fog is the full sight awareness. I am Ted.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I really
Mm.
appreciate it. I'm glad I asked it. Melissa, you have a good question. You're up. You're probably the last person because I suspect this will take a while.
Oh, I don't know if it will take very long. The analogy of the dream is very, very precious. In fact, it feels so powerful. It feels like a gift of grace, a gift from grace that we can turn to looking at the ways in which our sleeping dreams unfold to give us insight into how this process of misidentification occurs. I recognize that in the dream, the sleeping dream, nothing real ever happens, and there is no there is no real doer in the dream. There is only the dreamer that is dreaming the dream. And when the point of view in the dream, the apparent, the seeming I in the dream recognizes that it's a dream, they wake up, or the dreamer wakes up. The point of view of the person in the dream can't coexist with recognizing that it's all a dream. In that moment, the dream ends, and there is the true waking.
Often when we are dreaming, the idea this is a dream may occur to us, particularly if we experience something, but we know we can't experience in the waking state. For example, if we find ourselves flying, we know if we think about it, oh, this must be a dream. It's fairly obvious. And so many things we can experience in dreams. There's nothing we experience in the waking state that we couldn't experience in dreams. But there are things we experience in dream that we couldn't experience in the waking state. So often we get the idea in dream, this is a dream. People talk of what do they call it? Lucid dreams.
A lucid dream, yes.
All a lucid dream is a dream in which you recognize that it's a dream. But even though you recognize it as a dream, it still looks so real. And just because we recognize it's a dream, we don't necessarily wake up. But if we want to wake up, there's a very simple way of doing it. Turn your in the dream. If you recognize in the middle of a dream, but you're dreaming, try turning your attention back towards yourself. That is almost invariably that will result in waking up, because generally in dream, our identification with the dream body is not as strong as our identification with our present body. So a little bit of self-attentiveness is sufficient to dissolve the dream.
Yes.
It doesn't always work, because some dreams are more have the attachment to the body is stronger. So even though we practice self-attentiveness, it doesn't always wake us up. But in most cases, you'll find if you attend to yourself in a dream, it will result in waking. But merely thinking this is a dream, merely recognizing this is a dream, doesn't diminish the seeming reality of that state.
That's not my experience.
Okay.
In my experience, when I recognize that it's a dream, I awaken. and then I might choose to fall asleep again. But it awakens me,
Right.
and I have had
Maybe when you realize it's a dream, your attention is turning back to yourself.
yes,
Yeah.
that's probably true. And I did have one. I've had one very profound lucid dream, in which I repeatedly became aware it was a dream. And each time I became aware it was a dream, I awakened slightly, and then allowed myself. Okay, I could see how it all occurred, and then I allowed myself to go back into the dream, to play with it a little further, and then I awoke again. And it happened over and over again.
Yes. One reason why we often don't wake up when we realize something is a dream, it's very pleasant. For example, when we're flying, it's very pleasant flying. So let's enjoy it while we can.
Right. Well, I now interpret that experience as almost, it was a premonition of what my waking life is now. And that I am awakening to the true nature of reality. And anyway,
I think when we are beginning more and more to see through the seeming reality of this world, when we're no longer so convinced by the seeming reality of this world, it's the difference between waking and dream. It dissolves.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, Michael. Very much appreciate your presence.
You touched on something, Melissa, that's been on my mind for years and years, and I thought I was alone, that I was the only one who seemed to be in my dream at times, rare times, awakened to the fact that it's a dream. So that leads me to the question I want to ask you, Michael, if I can do a quick follow-up.
Can I just say one more thing on that? There was just one more thing.
Ahead.
That is, when we say that we wake up from a dream, and because the dream was very pleasant, we decide to go back to the dream. How can we be sure that we've actually woken up? Because sometimes one thing that most of us will have experienced at some time is that we wake up in the morning and we get up and we may go and brush our teeth and do whatever else we do in the morning. We may be rushing to work or something. Well, I'm late for work, I must get there quickly. So we rush, and suddenly we wake up again. So the first waking was waking from one dream into another dream. So it's very different. Yes. If we understand the unreality, if you understand the dreamlike nature of our present state, the boundary between dream and waking, it's very difficult to decide to say when we are awake and when. I mean, what we call awake is just another dream.
Yeah.
Yes, and that I think exactly. That's the insight that we are to draw from an experience like that. It gives rise to that insight, and then that brings us ever closer to the full awakening.
Yes, but what is important to remember, all these clarities that we get, these are useful as pointers, but we need to what these should be pointing at us, if we understand them correctly, if we understand these moments of clarity correctly, we should understand what we need to investigate is to whom are all these things? Because merely understanding this is all a dream, even being convinced all this is a dream, is not for real awakening. The real awakening will happen only when we experience ourselves as we actually are. And for that, self-investigation is without self-investigation, we cannot know ourselves as we actually are. So all these clarities we get along the way should be constantly urging us on to try to be more and more self-attentive, because that's the only way out of all this.
Melissa, thank you for your question. We're about ready to wrap it up, but Michael, aren't we missing, or maybe we're missing the larger question about this topic? I'm thinking while we're talking about the nocturnal dreams, what about the awakened dreams? When something bad happens to me, I've learned to do this, as probably everybody here has learned to do it. I'm not sure if it's right. When something sad or bad happens to me in my awakened dream called life, why can't I simply remind myself, and that's what I do, that this is part of the dream. This is part of the larger dream.
Understanding what Bhagavan said about that but what we take to be waking is just another dream. Mm-hmm. This is a very, very useful teaching if we want to detach ourselves. That doesn't mean if, for example, if we are bereaved, when someone near and dear to us passes away, we all feel sad. But that the event of that near and dear one passing away and our sadness are all part of a dream. So within this dream, we need to detach ourselves not only from the external events, also from the internal states of mind. Grief, when a near and dear one passes away, grief is inevitable. But we need to detach ourselves from that grief. Yes, this grief is there, but the grief we experience, time is a great healer. However much grief we feel, that grief does diminish with time. But while even in the midst of that grief, we need to try to detach ourselves and understand, yes, this is all part of the experience of this dream life. That is the grief, the joys and sorrows are all part of but all these joys and sorrows are something other than me. So we need to constantly be detaching ourselves from these things. Yeah. And the most effective way, we can detach ourselves to a certain extent by reflection, by thinking about these things. But we can only truly effectively detach ourselves only by turning within and holding on to our own being.
Yeah, great.
But reflecting like this helps us to turn within.
Yeah, it looks like Chandra Sakaran has a question real quick. We can get it in under the wire. It's a couple of minutes from noon rather. Go ahead with your question. I assume it's on this topic.
Yeah, it is on this topic. I find this, comparing to dream very, very helpful. Just taking, thinking about the waking as another dream. But one question is, I don't ever recall, having doing any amount of self-investigation in the dream, or even having like the thought of, okay, like, I'm having all these thoughts and like, should I think about myself and remaining about this teaching, which I frequently do in the waking state. Do you think that do you think that the fact that it's not, I'm not seeing that in the dream means that the waking is somewhat special, a special type of dream?
No, it doesn't mean that. And if you don't find that you're trying to practice self-investigation in a dream, don't worry about it, because there's only one moment at which you can investigate yourself. And that one moment is now. We shouldn't be thinking, when I get home from work and I put aside all my things, then I'll be able to attend to myself. Why should we wait till then? Here and now, am I not aware I am? So let's not worry about all the missed opportunities, either in dream or in waking. Now this present moment has been given to us. This present moment is the only opportunity we have. So let's make use of this present moment. Only if we are so one-pointed will we be able to. Bhagavan says we need to keep our attention on ourselves, sadakalamam, all the time. So
That
that
leads
should
you-
be our aim. So every moment we should take, this moment is the only opportunity I have to attend to myself.
Chandra, does that satisfy you?
Yes, thank you.
Right.
And thank you, Michael. We got into
Yeah.
some strange territory today, very useful territory, and I
Yeah.
want to thank you for
We're
your patience.
the very rising of ego is strange territory. We've been in strange territory since God knows when.
So I think it's safe
So
to say
let's
that I
return to the home territory of our own being.
so I think
That
it's
is
safe
the
to
only
say,
territory that is not strange.
listening to you, I think I can safely say the name of my ego is Ted.
No,
No?
no. Ego is that which is aware of itself as I am Ted.
Okay.
Ted one day is going to go. If ego doesn't go with Ted, then
That I didn't know.
then you'll be aware of yourself as I am
Yeah.
some other. I'm Fred.
So, okay, that's helpful. Ego doesn't go with Michael. Michael goes, Ted goes, but ego stays.
That is the problem.
Yeah.
Just because a dream comes to an end, dreaming doesn't come to an end, because so long as there's a dreamer, dreaming will continue, one dream after another.
I got to confess, I was never very good in school, but I love being in school with you. Thank you very much, Michael. It's
Well,
been
this
a
is a
delight.
slightly more interesting subject than most of the subjects we had to put up with in school.
Thank you.
Right.
Everybody here thanks you, or they wouldn't stay 2 hours because they're hungry for truth.